Hello, everybody. Mr. Gavin again. Welcome to our second part for our three-part Intro to Digital Illustration lesson series. If you have not watched our first video, definitely stop this one and go refer to that one before we move on here, because we'll focus specifically on the layer functions in Sketchbook, and we won't have a general overview. So if this is your first time ever looking at Sketchbook, definitely go back into the first video of the series because this is the second one. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get started. So for today's lesson, we will specifically focus and work with layers. We briefly went over and got to play around with it in our first lesson, but today we're focusing primarily on just layers and how they work with each other in Sketchbook. All right. Now, keep in mind, you will need your iPad, and you will also need an Apple Pencil or some drawing stylus that works with your iPad to kind of get this project moving along. Now, working with layers. Now, today you're going to learn what layers are and learn exactly how to utilize them in Sketchbook. Because when you draw traditionally, you really just have the one sheet or the one 2D surface, but in Sketchbook, it acts as a way for you to play around with multiple surfaces and stack them on top of each other to create your artwork, which is really awesome and gives you a lot of utility in your creative process. Today, what you're going to make is a nice and awesome colored landscape, as you can see right here, using many different layers. All right. So each of these colored sections exists on a separate layer. All right. Now, it might seem a little bit daunting, or it seems like there's a lot to do, but it's actually really quick and really easy once you learn exactly how to go about doing it. So let's dive right in and get started. Right now, I have a new project made. So if you already haven't, go ahead and make a new project. Okay. And right now, we need the fountain pen selected. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the fountain pen. See what size of our brush is. Let's bring it down to about halfway and keep the opacity at 100. Now, layers are basically, like I said, they're always transparent, and only what you draw on there will be what exists in that layer. So right now, everything looks white, and you're saying, what do you mean, Mr. Gavin? This layer is not transparent. Everything already exists here. Well, if you look right here on our layer toolbar, there's this kind of half-size layer right here. So if I turn off the hide, or if I turn on the hide function, everything turns into a gray and a slightly lighter gray checkerboard. Now this is the alpha. Basically, nothing exists here. So if you ever looked at an image online and you saw that it didn't have a background on it, that is basically what this space is. It's basically the transparent area, okay? So I'm still currently selected on my layer. So if I draw something in here, you'll notice how this line exists and the background doesn't still, okay? Because we still have the background turned off. So if I go to this half layer and I turn it back on, the background will exist, okay? You can also change the color of this background as well. So it has its own little color wheel right here. So if I select that, I get to manually change the color of that background. All right. We're not going to play around with this, but this is important for you to know in case you want to do it for your own art projects. But for today, we're just going to keep it at white because it will be covered eventually. All right. So I'm going to undo this line and we're going to get started on our project. Okay. So take your fingers and pinch inwards so that way you can really see the edges of your project all the way around. And if you want to know what size my project is, it's basically the standard size that they give you. So if I go to my new project, new sketch, my width is 2160 and my height is 1620. You don't need it exactly the same size. You kind of just need a rectangular shaped project. If you want a square project, you can. So it's up to you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. In our landscape example, we had a light blue color to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the background. So we're going to start a little bit further back, and then we'll slowly move forward. Because if you recall, whenever we make a layer, it makes it on top of our previous layer, therefore in front of what we drew. So it's best if we start back a little bit, so that way every time we make something new, it just kind of slowly appears in front. So that way we don't have to manually move our layers around too much. All right. So let's go ahead and change the color to a light blue. So we're going to slide our color wheel to about right there to a nice light blue. And if you've ever drawn landscapes before, usually because of atmospheric perspective, things further away are a little bit lighter. So we're going to make this blue a little bit lighter right there. Okay. And you can choose to use a different color. All I ask is that it's a lighter color. That's all. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a squiggly line. We're going to make a nice little hilly landscape. But what we need to do is start outside of our project space because we're going to use the fill tool afterwards. Now, if we start our line inside, there's going to be that gap on the side where your fill tool can push right through. So you want to start outside of your project, draw your line, and then end outside. Okay, like that. So I'm going to start outside of my project. And when I say start outside, I mean take your drawing stylus and start outside of this page. And then draw your squiggle across, like so. And then end outside. Okay. Now, if I zoom in, this guarantees that this line goes all the way to the edge of your project space. Okay. All right. Then you're going to hit your fill bucket tool right here. And you're just going to fill in the bottom half like that. So it kind of looks like an ocean. Okay. See, nice and easy. All right. Now we're going to repeat these steps for the next layer. Okay. So we're going to hit new layer right here. Okay. And you're going to do the same thing. The only difference is it's going to be slightly lower and a slightly darker blue. Now, we want to exit out of our fill bucket tool too, because it doesn't exit out automatically when we make a new layer. So what you do is you basically click the icon again to kind of quit the tool from being used. So let's go ahead and change the color of our blue by sliding it down a little bit so it's slightly darker. Not too much, just slightly darker. Create another line, like so. And you can have it slightly varying so it feels a little bit different. Hit the fill bucket, poke, fill in again, like that. Okay. Exit out of the fill bucket tool. All right. Now we're going to repeat this process about 2 more times, okay? So right now we are creating our middle ground, essentially. And as you know, in a landscape, we have 3 grounds. We have foreground, middle ground, and our background, okay? Foreground's in front, middle's in the middle, background's all the way in the back, all right? And we're inching slowly closer to our foreground. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. Make a slightly darker blue. Draw a fun little squiggly line. Make it vary a little bit. Select your fill bucket tool and fill it in. Like so. Okay, and now you're going to do this one more time. So new layer. Make a even darker blue now, because now we're hitting your foreground. Okay. Exit out your fill bucket tool if you already have it, and draw your foreground. Now your foreground's at the bottom, right here. So it can be a lot flatter because it's a lot closer too, like so. Because we're seeing it really up close, and these objects we're seeing a lot further away. Hit your fill bucket tool and fill it in. All right. Nice. Good work. Now, to really put in perspective, we're going to start to draw some objects into this scene. Now, if you recall the image that we're referring to, it's like a little colored desert landscape that uses complementary colors. So you use blue and orange. So on this foreground, we're going to draw some cactuses on here. We're not going to have to play with too many fancy layer functions. All we got to do is take our currently selected fountain pen and increase the size. Now, cactuses are pretty easy to draw. They're just kind of like tubular objects that kind of come out. So we're going to draw one on the left and one on the right to kind of frame our sunset in the center that we're going to make. So let's start on the left-hand side. We're going to start inside of the ground. And you're just going to draw a shape coming up like that. Okay. Nice and easy. And then you can kind of have these little L shapes coming out. Okay. One cactus. And you can draw another one on the right-hand side. So I'm going to make this one a little bit taller just so it varies a little bit more. And I'll give it some more plant appendages. Like so. See? Nice and easy. Kind of just framing our landscape. Now I'm going to bring down my brush size. And I'm just going to draw little bushes on the bottom. Just to kind of have more little variations of shapes. Like that. And all I'm doing is I'm taking my brush and I'm kind of just squiggling it like that repeatedly. But I'm filling in the gaps too. Like so. And they're your bushes, so you can draw them however you like. But if you're curious as to how I was drawing them, that's exactly how I was doing it. All right. Nice and easy. Like so. Okay. And then after you finish that, we're going to move on into the background with the sunset and the sky. All right. And that's kind of where we're going to change it up a little bit. Now, for our background, it has to be in the back. But what I like to do is I like to start with the middle and foreground first, because the background's going to be, half of it's going to be covered anyways. So it's just easier to kind of create the layers and then just move them afterwards. So that way you also get to practice that step as well. So we're going to make a new layer. And you're going to hold down on this layer with your drawing tool. So it grows a little bit bigger, and you're going to drag it all the way down so it appears at the bottom. Okay. So you hold down that layer, and you get to manually drag it downwards to the bottom. So now whatever we draw appears in the back, like so. Okay. Now we're going to use our fill bucket tool, and we're going to select orange for our nice sunset sky, like so. Maybe I'll go with a little lighter orange, like so. Here we go. Nice and light. See? You don't even have to draw anything in this layer. You just gotta kind of fill this whole layer in with one color. We are going to make a nice gradient though, however. So turn off your fill bucket tool and select the airbrush tool. Okay. Now we're going to make a darker orange kind of cascading on the top. So we're going to select that darker orange by shifting this orange downwards a little bit and also shifting it to a more reddish orange on our color wheel like that. Okay, you'll visibly see the difference between the two oranges. Just like that. Bring up your brush size to probably maximum, actually. You want this brush to be pretty big. Okay, zoom out a little bit. And where you want to use your brush and kind of sketch out the gradient is you actually kind of want to fill it in outside of your project. So that way the edge of the brush kind of goes inside of the project. Okay, so you want to take your brush pen, kind of sketch outside right here. Okay, so if I show you, just like so. Okay. And you'll see how that darker orange adds a nice soft transition. Because this is a nice gradient, so you definitely want the transition from one color to the next to be a lot softer instead of, say, for example, being really harsh. And you can kind of see the edge. Let me undo that. Okay. Just like so. And we're almost done. Now we have to add in our sun object. Okay. So let's go ahead and make a new layer right here. And this is a tool you should be familiar with. We're going to select our draw style tool. Okay. And we do have to change our brush because when you use the draw style tool, it does make these shapes with the brush you have selected. So since we still have our airbrush tool, if I change my color to white, you'll notice that if I make a line, it's going to be an airbrushed line. So we actually want to go back into using our fountain pen. So that way the lines are nice and harsh and defined. And we're going to select our circular shape. And if you already haven't, go ahead and select white. And to the best of your ability, try to make a circle, like so. Okay. And then to fill it in, we're going to use our fill bucket tool and fill it in like that. Okay. Now keep in mind, if you already haven't, double check this circular shape should be on a separate layer from your background. So right now I'm hiding and unhiding it just so you can see. And the reason it needs to be on a separate layer is if I go to the transform tool right here, it's almost like I'm creating my own sunrise, sunset. Okay. Additionally, you can change the size of your sun to be bigger and smaller to kind of fit the needs for your landscape, like so. Bring it up, bring it down, wherever you want. I'm just going to have it right in the middle, nice and spaced right here. Okay. Okay, so if you already haven't, go ahead and double check, make sure that this sun object is on a separate layer from your background by just making a new layer. And the next and final step we're going to do is make this glow. Okay, we're going to do a cool layer function to make this glow. Okay. So what you are going to do is you're going to select the layer that this sun object is on. Okay, so if you never know what the layer your objects are on, you can always just turn it on and off and you'll visibly see it appear and disappear. So you're going to open the layer window and you're going to duplicate that object. Okay, I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to get a new one right above. Okay, go back into that layer window for the new one. And just like with our brushes, layers have opacity as well. Okay, so we're going to bring down the opacity to about 30-ish. Doesn't have to be exactly 30. It can be like 29, 31, it's fine. It's kind of hard to always get the exact number, so I'm just going to go to like 30-ish. Okay. Then if I hit the transform tool, and if I make it a little bit bigger, you'll see that I have that circular object, but it's slightly faded, like so. Okay. And you're probably wondering, oh, how is that a glowing effect? Well, we're going to duplicate this multiple times and make each new one slightly bigger than the previous one. So I'm going to do my best to kind of center this new one right behind, like so. And then once I'm finished, I'm going to duplicate this layer. And since it's duplicated from our previous layer, it also keeps the opacity. So all I have to do is transform it and make it slightly bigger. And now they're stacking on top of each other. Okay. Hit duplicate again, transform, make it slightly bigger. And I'll do it maybe one more time. Bigger and right behind. Now, the reason it's making this transition from like a light color into a darker or more solid white is these transparent layers are stacking on top of each other. So the further out they go, the less they stack because you made them bigger and bigger. So this is like 4 layers stacked together transparently, then 3, then 2, then just 1. So that's why it's automatically making this nice gradient for you without you actually having to put in the effort to do so. Okay. Pretty neat, huh? Okay. There you have it. A nice, simple landscape and a nice overview and specification on just the layer functions. All right. Now, if there are some functions that you're curious about, you're always free to go and play with these layer functions on your own. And yeah, these are the base functions that you kind of need to know just to kind of dive into digital illustration. All right. So there is one last thing I do want to show you before we end this lesson. So let's go ahead and reselect our sky layer, which is the orange right here. Okay. Now the reason it looks like the sun's disappearing is because it's white when I turn it on and off, but it's not actually disappearing. So select that layer and open the layer window. And the last function that we're going to show is the HSL adjustment. And HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. So I'm going to click on this and it's going to open a window. And the one reason I do want to show you this, especially for the landscape, is on this top bar right here. If I slide it around, it changes the hue of the color in that layer. So instead of manually choosing a new color, you can always play around with the hue and then just switch it to whatever you feel like is most comfortable for you. So earlier I had it at orange. Maybe I want it more of a magenta-y color like that. Just slide it there. And the other 2 bars place with the saturation and the lightness. So the middle bar is the saturation. So I can make it more gray or really vibrant, or I can make it super dark or really bright. Okay. So play with that as at your own leisure. Okay. And that will end our lesson. So let's go ahead and quickly see what's up for the third and final part of our Intro to Digital Illustration series. Okay, let's go back into our PowerPoint. All right, so congratulations. You quickly and efficiently and artistically learned how to make this nice little landscape scene. So next time for your third and final part in this digital illustration, Intro to Digital Illustration series, you will play with some brushes. So we learned how to play with some layers today, and next time we're going to focus specifically on brushes. And we'll explain what exactly brushes are. We'll focus on the brush library, and we'll use the brush to create some fur texture. All right. So it'll be pretty awesome and exciting, and can't wait to see you next time. Thank you for joining me on part 2 of the Intro to Digital Illustration series. Have a great one. I'll see you next time.